Ukrainian PM Oleksandra Ustinova went on Fox News to criticize the United States and its response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Now, let me just preface this by saying that my heart goes out to her and of course the people of Ukraine. But with that said, I do disagree with a lot of what she has to say here. Let's watch.
All we keep asking is help protect our sky. You've heard what Mikhailo was saying previously about the no-fly zone. The no-fly zone means that we can protect our civilian population. I just keep telling them it's not about politics, because I was looking at the sanctions and I was very surprised because we were promised that if the Russian soldier steps on the Ukrainian land, we will have a really good response. Well, I'm sorry, but the sanctions avoided the energy sector. So let's talk honestly that you care more about whether you pay extra 50 cents for your gas prices or how many people die in Ukraine. We've been promised SWIFT. We have 5 banks on the SWIFT that were blocked out of 300 in Russia. You call these sanctions?
So that is a member of parliament. I think I misspoke and said PM, but member of parliament, just be very clear about that. And look, I think that there's definitely some truth in what she had to say toward the end of her statement, especially when it comes to the sanctions that the United States has implemented and what they really impact. So we'll get to those details in a second. But I want to reiterate, a no-fly zone is a terrible idea. We do not support a no-fly zone. It will lead to a direct war between the United States and Russia. It significantly escalates the situation. And look, there appears to be some positive progress, and hopefully this agreement is really carried out. Let's go to the last graphic here. Russia and Ukraine have agreed on the need to set up humanitarian corridors and a possible ceasefire around them for fleeing civilians, both sides said after talks on Thursday. So they're continuing their talks. They have not reached a peace agreement yet, but it is the first sign of progress on any issue since the invasion. So again, no-fly zone, bad idea. But I do want to have a discussion about what she had to say about the sanctions in just a moment. Cenk.
Yeah, so she actually has 2 great points. One is that the Ukrainians gave up nuclear weapons that were based in Ukraine after the Soviet Republic broke up, with assurances that if something were to happen, the West would defend them. Now, those were loose assurances. They were not in NATO, but that's the first. I was reminded of that in the last couple of days, and I was like, yeah, honestly, I'd forgotten that. That is a pretty good point. Now, having said that, it's just in this one case, in the no-fly zone, there really is nothing we can do. Because if we put American fighters up there, the Russian fighters are up there, they're gonna fire at each other. And then we're gonna be in open war. We have 90% of the nukes in the world. That's not gonna help Ukraine, Russia, America, or anyone else on the planet. So it's just, I know why they want it, I get it, and my heart goes out to them, and they should fight for it. Well, actually they shouldn't, because I think that even in the long run, it's bad for Ukraine. But I get why they're fighting for it, and I love them for it, but we really can't do that one. Now, she's also right about the oil sanctions. I think she's most right about that. We'll get back to that in a second. But in terms of the more updates, I'm a little stunned at how much the Russians have bogged down. So the Russians have confirmed there's at least 500 Russian soldiers dead, and the Ukrainians say it's 9,000. Even if the number is 500, man, they're taking heavy casualties. And just as importantly, that giant 40-mile convoy of tanks is bogged down 16 miles outside of Kiev, and it's not moving. So it's stuck at 16 miles outside the city, and some of them are getting picked off by drones. There's a story of a guy who rushed up, an old man rushed up through a Molotov cocktail in one of them and got him. Like, I can't believe they're not moving.
Well,
this is so, I don't know, so far from the outside, it looks like the Ukrainians are doing an amazing job of fighting.
Okay, so I want to also just say we got to be careful because of fog of war and how certain things are portrayed in the media, certainly on social media. But this is something this is a perspective that I thought was definitely accurate when you consider propaganda and how it tends to work, especially in a country like Russia. Remember, the Russian troops, bought into the propaganda. They were fed the propaganda regarding the people of Ukraine and how they were going to be the liberators for the people of Ukraine. So they thought they were going to invade this country and be welcomed by Ukrainians. And
well,
we're shocked
I've heard that before.
And I think that's actually a really interesting and important perspective, right? You kind of have to think about the bubble that these troops have been living in themselves and the kind of propaganda that they've been fed. So I do want to go back to the sanctions for a second though, right? Because look, I'm really uncomfortable with the celebratory nature of sanctions that harm ordinary Russians. They didn't ask for this. They're dealing with an authoritarian leader. They had no say in whether Russia was going to invade Ukraine or not. And it really, it breaks my heart to see ordinary people suffering financially. It's also telling that what the member of parliament was saying there was certainly correct about certain sanctions not impacting fossil fuels coming from Russia. So the White House slapped sanctions on exports of technologies to Russia's refineries and the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which, as you guys probably know, never even launched yet, right? So far, it has stopped short of targeting Russia's oil and gas exports as the Biden administration weighs the impacts on global oil markets and US energy prices. So what she said there about, hey, you guys are more concerned about paying more for gas than you are about human lives in Ukraine, she had a point there. I don't think that she's referring to ordinary Americans, but she's referring to the US government's actions here. The United States did slap sanctions on Russia's oil refineries, banning the export of specific technologies, and a move that could make it harder for Russia to modernize those plants. But again, this is a sanction in regard to technology, not a sanction in regard to the actual fossil fuels, namely the oil. In fact, a spokesperson for the White House said this: "We don't have a strategic interest in reducing global supply of energy. That would raise prices at the gas pump for Americans." So I want to reiterate how much of a disaster it is that the world is still so dependent on these fossil fuels and how that impacts things like foreign policy. If we were, further down the path of being more reliant on renewable energy, I think we would have been in a far better position. The administration did warn, though, that it could block Russian oil if Moscow heightens aggression against Ukraine. The top Democrat and a Republican on the Senate Energy Committee floated a bill that would prohibit the import of Russian crude, liquid fuels, and liquefied natural gas. The United States imported an average of more than 20.4 million barrels of crude and refined products a month in 2021 from Russia, about 8% of the US liquefied fuel imports, and that's according to the Energy Information Administration.
Okay, so when she says you guys are more concerned about 50 cents at the pump than Ukrainian lives, I think that is just flat out true. And so there's two different set of folks here that we're talking about. One is Europe. Europe gets 40% of its energy from Russia, so they're totally hooked on that crack. And if they turn it off, there's going to be significant discomfort in Europe. And it'll be way worse in Europe than it is here in America. And so that's part of the reason why they're not doing the oil sanctions. And then the other reason is us, because let's keep it real. If we sanction their oil and then prices go up here, because they definitely will, because it'll affect the world supply of oil, which affects our prices, what's gonna happen? You all know it. Fox News is gonna howl. Tucker Carlson and all, oh my God, it's Biden's fault, as if Biden invaded Ukraine. The oil prices are based on supply and demand in the world.
Right.
In the world. So if Russia shuts off their oil or we shut off Russia's oil, that is going to increase prices. There's nothing Biden or Trump or the ghost of Reagan can do. There's nothing you can do about it. And in fact, it would be a heroic thing to do. It would be the right thing to do. It would put more pressure on the Russians because they're hurt, dog. Don't ask them if they're all right. Lukoil, which is a huge oil producer out of Russia, today put out a message about support for Ukrainians. Interesting, all of a sudden, giant Russian business interests are showing support for Ukrainians. They're hurt, and that's without the oil sanctions.
Right.
But it's not just the sanctions. Shell Oil pulled out of all deals in Russia, and that also hurts Russia because they help to produce some of that oil. So they're in a world of pain right now. But if we do the oil sanctions, they're gonna be in desperate straits. but it would cost us 50 cents more per gallon, and Fox News would yell at Biden forever and ever and ever, and they would trick everybody into thinking it was Biden's fault, and they wouldn't give a damn about Ukrainians or anyone who's dying.
Yeah.
They have no morals at Fox News. They would never explain what the actual reality of the situation is. And Anna's right about the renewable energies. The oil and the gas is inside Russia. It's inside Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, etc. If we got in a war with these countries and we were on renewable energies, you can't shut off the sun. You can't turn off the wind. And so we would still have renewable energy, and there'd be nothing that they could do about it, Russia or the Middle East or anyone else. We've got to get there right away. And what do we tell you 1,000 times over? By the way, what did the Pentagon tell you? That it's a national security interest that we switch over to renewable energies.
Exactly.
But again, you'll never hear that from the right wing, who are loaded up with nothing but liars.
One final thing I want to mention in regard to prices at the pump, and people are concerned about that. It's legitimate, especially with the backdrop of corporations jacking up their prices for their products and taking advantage of the inflation narrative. Look, the problem with the right-wing solution to this, which is we need energy dependence, we need to drill more fossil fuels. Like Jake alluded to this in an earlier show. Guys, we haven't nationalized these natural resources, right? We haven't nationalized oil or natural gas. And so what will happen? Okay, these private corporations will drill more. There's no guarantee that they're gonna ensure that supply is, that Americans will be prioritized with that supply. Yes. There's no guarantee. In fact, I will guarantee you that they will sell those fossil fuels to the highest bidder.
We just don't keep that oil. It's nothing but a lie. They could sell it to anyone they want.
Exactly.
It doesn't stay in the country. So the entire narrative of drill so we'll have more oil is 100% lie. But look, we're so used to the lies, it's just overwhelming in America. The media is filled with wall-to-wall lies, and yes, the Republican Party drives giant percentage of that. I mean, the Russian soldiers, as Anna told you, thought they were gonna be greeted as liberators. Who else said that? Dick Cheney said that when we were going into Iraq. They talked about how they were gonna throw roses at our feet. Yeah, unless roses is a code word for IEDs, that's not how it turned out. And that's certainly not how it's turning out in Ukraine. So right-wing authoritarian propagandists are everywhere, including in Russia and America. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.